I just got done planting the state tree in Wisconsin, a sugar maple, out on the Capitol grounds. What a great day to be able to do that, and we look forward to that being a mighty maple at some point. Maybe we can even tap it for a little maple syrup. So I want to, Mr. French, I want to piggyback a little bit on the chairman's questions there. What's the number one change that could be made to get there? You just used the phrase "to get there," you know, in terms of having more harvest, and I think we're driving at how we had management a few decades ago that was so successful. And in order to get there, what's the number one thing you would change?
Change in the agency or in general?
What's the number one change? As in the position that you're in, let's say you're king for a day in the United States Forest Service. In order to get there, what's the number one change that would help us get there?
I think the number one thing is being able to clearly show people the true costs and consequences of what we're doing, and then being able to prioritize the resources we have towards delivering what those choices are. If you're going to deliver on wildland fire fuels reduction, we can, as the chairman pointed out, most oftentimes, not always, pay for the saw logs to get out. I've got to figure out a way to pay for all the small diameter and other pieces, because the saw logs don't usually pay for the biomass. If I could make a change, I would figure out a solution that does both. Gives me a way to transport and dispose and utilize biomass in a way that I can also deliver the broader set of saw logs at the same time in this forestry question. That's what I would shift.
So what's the impediment to get that biomass off from the forest floor?
Fuel costs and costs of utilization, and a loss of an integrated set of markets out there, forest markets, of where you have to take that stuff to.
So in other words, the loss of, for example, I cited in my testimony the loss of sawmills.
It's
a big problem, right?
It is a part of it, yes.
So the Federal Forest Resource Coalition puts out I see it quarterly, a quarterly update on how much harvest is coming off from the U.S. Forest Service lands. Do you see that report?
I have seen their reports in the past. I'm not sure if I saw the latest one.
Because what's striking to me is subsequent to huge amounts of money being authorized to try to get rid of this backlog, to be able to, we were told that this is simply going to take more money to be able to harvest more wood and all the rest. We're actually not seeing that in the data. So what is it going to take to get more harvest off from those federal lands?
So again, on the wildfire crisis strategy, the focus there is how do you increase or decrease the risk to communities that are threatened by wildfire. And that is going to run the gamut of work that can be from removing chaparral and shrubs all the way to saw logs. And we've been focusing on the communities that are most at risk. Unfortunately, many of those places are places that lack a connected forest products industry. We spend a lot of time trying to connect those two. I understand the criticisms, but what I can say is we increased our fuels reduction last year by more than 1 million acres based on those investments. We've been holding fairly steady on our timber volume outputs. We've been trying to create ways that you connect the two more directly. But I would also say that there should be as much investment in the budget items that are for forest products as there is for fuels. They drive a capacity that does similar but different things at times.
Are you saying that they're not capturing the fuels reduction that you're doing in that data?
No, I'm saying that there are places where we are doing significant fuels reduction that isn't necessarily about removing saw logs.
So it's so the data's not capturing that. So how they're measuring this is, would that be accurate, that they're not capturing some of the work that you're doing?
What we are showing and we will be able to come back to Congress and show this, is what's the overall risk reduction that we're creating to the communities that we're trying to protect. That is a better outcome to look at in terms of overall value of the work we're doing versus how many acres you treat or how much volume we produce. And I say that not to say that we're not wanting to make sure that we create a sustainable amount of volume at any given time. But the investments we've had to reduce wildland fire risk, which primarily came through bill and IRA, are not necessarily connected. If you're trying to reduce wildland fire risk in some of your most fire-prone communities, at times you're going to be doing it in ways. I'll give you an example, and I know I'm over time, but yesterday I was meeting with a community that is in the exact same predicament we are.
There's nobody here to object. Go
All
ahead.
right. All right. But I mean, this is the conversation that I just went through yesterday. They had to dispose of tons and tons of acres of trees because they couldn't figure out how to subsidize the cost to transport them to someplace to be utilized, or that for them to be utilized. So if you're going to reduce wildland fire risk to a community that doesn't have infrastructure, to use what I think increases the scale, like logging, like timber sales, then the costs are higher per acre, and you don't necessarily see those outputs. And this is worth us getting into a deeper conversation, but that's what's going on.
We look forward to having that conversation with you. Are there other agencies that are a problem here also? Because from my understanding, the EPA has been a problem in terms of being able to build a plant specifically in the upper Midwest, possibly even in my home state of Wisconsin, and they have denied the ability to do that, to be able to, because of, they say, emissions concerns.
I'm not aware of that. What I will say is integrated forest products industry is an incredibly important piece for us to reduce wildland fire risk and maintain healthy forests.
If this question is redundant, I apologize. I was planting that maple tree. Is there any scientific reason why forest management projects should be limited to no more than 3,000 acres?
You mean in our categorical exclusions?
Yeah.
Well, part of that was based on what Congress told us. And so when those were promulgated, when those CEs were promulgated, let's say under the Healthy Forest Restoration Act, that's what Congress said was the limit for something not being significant. For the things that we have promulgated, what we do is we look at our past history of environmental assessments that find that projects are not significant, and we use those to say, here's the acreages that we would say a new CE would make.
Might it be helpful if you can expand that CE if it would be appropriate for that landscape?
It is always helpful for us to have, okay, here's how I'll answer it. A CE takes us about 143 days to finish and costs about the quarter of what an EA does. An EA takes about 390 days to finish and costs, essentially a third of what an EIS does. And so you always have these scales of efficiencies. And so my answer to you is that we use the best tools we have, whether it's things we've created ourselves or from Congress, to try to hit the most work we can with the resources we have.
If you had the ability to expand beyond 3,000 acres for CEs, might you use that in some projects?
If we had authorities that were greater than our current limits, if we could make it through ESA and other pieces and local collaboration, then of course we'd use those.
What are some of the primary reasons projects today require an EA or an EIS as opposed to a CE? I mean, what are the couple primary reasons that?
The most significant piece is that we deal with, there's two, is that the larger the project that you want to authorize, you're usually outside the scope of a categorical exclusion.
So larger than 3,000 acres?
Yes. If we're doing a 10,000, 20,000, 38,000 acre project. And the likelihood that you start to have potentially significant issues rises, whether that is compliance with the National Heritage Protection Act or ESA, or even your local community that is looking at this through a different lens. Those are the sorts of things that start to occur with larger projects.
What would be the impact if there's not a permanent solution to the Cottonwood decision? Let me start out. Can I preface it with a question?
Sure.
Has the Cottonwood decision been a major impediment in getting some projects done?
It increases our costs on a per unit basis in places where we are authorizing projects so that we are guarding ourselves against litigation, and it creates
Significantly?
risk. What's that?
Does it significantly increase
Yeah,
costs?
sure.
Like, give me a project that, did it increase it by 25% or 50%? Do you have?
So, okay, so here's the way I would say it. We can do a project in one part of the country where we know that the risk for litigation or for under like a Cottonwood type approach, but it's all litigation, will generally be 3 to 4 times less on the environmental compliance side because of the way we do the analysis. And unit costs are probably around half, sometimes more. That's the business that I work within. And I'm not here to say one way is right or another. I just know if I do a project here, it's gonna cost me this. And if I do it over here, it's gonna cost me a different amount.
So I just want to hone in, final question here. On unit cost, you said it's up to half. What do you mean by unit cost for being able to remove that wood? Is it a 50% increase in cost, or does it double it?
Doubles it.
So it doubles the cost of removal as a result of increased litigation.
The level of analysis that we are going to do on an acre in one of those places will be much higher than we may in other places, and that increases those unit costs.
And you've
Sure.
seen an example where it's been double. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, very good. I am way over time, and I appreciate you taking the time, Mr. French, to come here today and testify. It's always good to have you here and provide information from the Forest Service perspective.